Recent studies from the University of Alabama at Birmingham indicate that up to 40% of young adults are exhibiting signs of insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a serious condition that can lead to very dire consequences. In addition, the University of North Carolina has published multiple times about the high rate of metabolic imbalance. The most recent one in 2021 indicates that 93% of the population shows some sort of insulin dysregulation, metabolic imbalance, whether it's high levels of insulin, belly fat, high levels of blood sugar, etc. So this is a serious problem. Welcome back to Metabolic Health Solutions, where we empower health practitioners and self-healers to heal themselves and heal their patients who have metabolic imbalances. I'm Dr. RitaMarie Loscalzo, a functional nutrition doctor. I'm the founder of the Institute of Nutritional Endocrinology, and I'm the author of the book Unstoppable Health. Today, I want to talk about why conventional doctors are wrong about insulin resistance. What I believe is the first misconception, the first mistake that doctors make and leads to mishandling of insulin resistance and lack of identifying it early enough is that they're not looking for it early. They're not looking for signs of insulin resistance early on. What they don't teach in medical school, and what is absolutely true, is that for most people who end up with an insulin resistance or diabetes problem, the insulin levels are elevated, sometimes as long as decades before the blood sugar goes out of balance. That's pretty darn serious. When the insulin is elevated, what's happening is we end up with insulin resistance. The cells are like, come on, don't give me this anymore. There's too much insulin, and damage can occur to the receptors on the cells. And the cells say, hold on, enough's enough, enough's enough. And it's only later, after that's been happening for quite a while, that the blood sugars actually are detectably higher and higher and higher. So because we're not seeing early diagnosis, so not testing insulin, most doctors don't even test insulin in type 1 diabetics or type 2 diabetics, which is a crime, but everybody should have their insulin tested early on. Once we test somebody's insulin and we see that it's higher than it needs to be, higher than it should be, and that this person is leading to signs of metabolic imbalance, signs of insulin resistance and diabetes, then what happens is we wait, or conventional medicine will wait until the fasting blood sugar goes high. And that's actually one of the last signs that there's a problem. And then they start to treat the symptoms. So they'll prescribe an anti-diabetic medication. They'll prescribe metformin or something like that to help bring the blood sugars down. And you're not really addressing the underlying causes of why did this person become insulin resistant in the first place. There's a misconception that it's just age. As we age, we naturally get insulin resistant. But that's not true. It's the lifestyle and the imbalances that are present up to that point that lead to developing insulin resistance. So one of the things that we see that when doctors are trying to address insulin resistance, they may give, I would say, lip service to diet. Just tell people eat less, lose weight. I remember working with a client and she had been to the doctor and her glucose levels were inching up towards the diabetic level. And the doctor said, oh, you're pre-diabetic and come back in 6 months. And if you're diabetic, we'll put you on medication. She lost it at that point. It's like, no, I don't want to wait to become diabetic. I want to address this now. So he basically said to her, lose weight. You're overweight, go lose weight, and that should help. That wasn't enough, right? It's more than just lose weight. It's more than go on a low-fat diet. Even go on a low-carb diet, which most of them aren't even saying. If you look at the food exchanges that the dietitians have, it's like you can have this many servings of sugar and this many servings of bread and this many servings of. It's not really addressing the problem with having those high spikes of glucose, which lead to high spikes of insulin, which lead to dramatic drops in glucose. And then the insulin then damages the cells and we become insulin resistant. They're not addressing that. They're not addressing the processed foods. They're not addressing the fact that we're eating fats that are, not that we're eating too much fat, because most people actually are eating too little fat. they're eating the wrong kinds of fats. They're eating fats that cause oxidative damage and stress and damage the cells, which increases the insulin resistance. So conventional doctors are not trained to look for the root causes. They're trained to figure out what the symptoms are, what diagnosis that person has, and then apply some sort of a usually pharmaceutical strategy. In this particular case of insulin resistance, metformin is prescribed. But what they're not going at is what are the underlying. So another thing that I see is that they don't even pay any attention to the gut insulin connection. There's a serious connection between what's going on in the gut and what's going on in the blood sugar management. And right now, I think some of that's getting in the limelight with the GLP-1 drugs, and GLP-1 is a hormone that gets produced in the gut, and it affects how the body manages insulin levels. Right. So what we do is we need to be looking at the gut. We need to be looking at microbiome balance. Do we have the right organisms in there? The majority of people, the underlying cause of the gut imbalance is similar to the cause of the high levels of insulin, which is too much sugar and too much refined carbohydrate in the diet. And so when we look at that, we have to look at, okay, what's going on in this person's gut? And we do testing on everybody's gut if they're showing signs of insulin resistance, because when the microbalance gets out of whack, insulin gets dysregulated. When we get it under control and the body is given the right foods and substrates to produce its own GLP-1 and not need the external drugs, the insulin levels, they come down. And one of the things that most people don't realize about high levels of insulin causes food cravings. It causes the body to want more and more food, and it causes the body to store the excess calories as fat. Insulin is an anabolic hormone, not in a good way, in that it helps you put on muscles like, say, testosterone, in a bad way, in that it stores fat. So we really need to be looking at the gut connection, asking questions about how is the gut functioning, doing some specific testing to see how is the gut functioning, and then advising people with diet and lifestyle approaches to balancing the gut so we can get good insulin control. So very much connected to this gut insulin connection is the effect of stress and the effect of lack of sleep on the body. So here's the deal. Overnight, I call it the symphony of hormones that happens while we sleep. And while we sleep, we have the insulin levels come down, we trigger fat burning, the growth hormone goes up, leptin is down so that we're satiated, we're not hungry overnight. All these good things happen while we sleep. When we are awake and we're in a state of bliss and relaxation, the body can do its thing. But most people are not. Most people are in a 24/7 state of constant stress. It's as if a tiger is chasing you. What happens if a tiger was chasing you? You would need to mobilize stored sugar into the blood so that you can get away, right? So you can run and jump and hide and climb trees and all that. But because when we go into this mode of stress because of the finances, the politics, the everything else that goes on, right? Those are not things that require physical prowess. And so when we have that same response, it's an innate, old kind of a response. It's a limbic system response, an old part of the brain. And when we have that response happening, we still mobilize the same sugar. We still look for stored sugars, and the sugar goes up, the insulin goes up, and it's as if you just ate a candy bar. I call it the candy bar eating effect of stress, without the pleasure of the candy bar. So stress is important to get under control, and sleep is important. What studies show is that even one night of bad sleep in an otherwise metabolically fit and healthy individual will cause a temporary insulin resistance the next day. This is well documented in the literature. Well, okay, how many people do you know that are just having one bad night of sleep? Maybe a few, but most people are having multiple nights of bad sleep. They're laying awake worrying about their finances. They've got a kid that's sick. They've got a dog that's sick, whatever the reason. People are on average getting way less sleep than we used to. On average, it's like 6 to 7 hours of sleep for most people. And honestly, what we need for adequate insulin and blood sugar regulation is more like 7 to 9 hours, closer to the 9 hours for a lot of folks. So we need the sleep to manage those blood sugar levels, to manage that symphony of hormones that happens overnight, to help us to store lean with the help of growth hormone and break down fat, as opposed to when we have high levels of insulin in the system, what are we doing? We're storing fat and we're inhibiting the storage of lean. So those are super important things that a lot of doctors, they're not taught that in medical school, and they're overlooking the impact of those things on people's problems. So going back to what I said just a bit ago about the fact that in the olden times, right, in our more ancestral ages, we needed to run away from tigers. The truth of the matter is there were dangerous animals out there, and we were in true danger, and we needed our blood sugars to go up. But back in those days, we were not in the state of constant feasting like we are in the modern times. You wake up at 3 a.m. and you're hungry and you don't have food in your house, you can just drive out and find a convenience store, with the exception of people living in the middle of the woods. But for most people, food is available and abundant round the clock. And in the olden days, we went through periods of feast and famine, feast and famine. And when we were in the state of famine, it's equivalent to what we talk about a lot today is fasting, right? So I feel like we need, in order to get this insulin problem under control, one of the things that conventional docs are not taught about is the whole importance of metabolic flexibility. If there's sugar available, food is plentiful, no problem, we can burn that and we can burn it efficiently. If the food is not available, we can burn our stored fats, our stored glycogen, whatever, when food is not plentiful. So in those famine periods, we need to have the flexibility to be able to store. No, let me say that again. We need to have the flexibility to be able to access the stored fuel on our body. Most people are not good at that. Right? If there's not sugar available, because the metabolic flexibility hasn't been developed, if there's not food available, they're like starving, they're falling on their faces, they're hangry, right? We hear that all the time. We have periods of low blood sugar, we have periods of incoherence and brain fog and all that. We need to be able to develop metabolic flexibility, which means if sugar's available, you can burn the sugar. If it's not, you can resort to a state called ketosis, where your body actually can burn fat, right? It takes a little while to get into ketosis for the average person, but when we get this developed, this flexibility, we can get into that state much more quickly, and we can maintain a state of just low-grade nutritional ketosis so that we're always ready. We always have available fuel to be able to support us. So I think that one of the big things that doctors need to be taught in medical school is the concept of metabolic flexibility. So I've been doing this work for over 30 years, 33 years to be exact, at the time of this airing. And one of the ways I first got into this was restoring my own health through fasting. Learning about fasting and learning about the healing benefits of it. So over the years, I've worked with tens of thousands of clients and patients and students and trained doctors in the art of how do you address insulin resistance? How do you prevent insulin resistance? So I have put together quite a number of resources, and you can check the description down below. I have a guide to fasting for practitioners and for people who just want to deal with their own health, right? It's the many faces of fasting, I think is what I call it. And you'll see the link to it down below. I have numbers of guidelines for using plant-powered keto, plant-based keto. I don't mean that somebody has to go vegan 100%, but more like including a lot of plants and also getting themselves into a state of mild nutritional ketosis so that you're getting that metabolic flexibility going on. And a lot of people believe when they do keto that it's just butter and bacon, butter and bacon, butter and bacon, right? That there's no place for carbohydrates. And what that does is it it eliminates foods that are loaded with phytochemicals, loaded with nutrients, loaded with fiber and all kinds of stuff that help to support a healthy body, a healthy insulin receptors, and a healthy blood sugar management. So you can check those out down below. So we've covered a lot here. And if you're listening and you're a conventionally trained doctor, which a lot of conventionally trained doctors listen, watch my channel, listen to my podcast, and learn a lot, and are sometimes shocked by the misconceptions that they've had based on their conventional training. And so as we close, I want to leave you with a few parting words. I want you to critically think about the problem of insulin resistance. Not think about how you were taught and how you were told to wait until the glucose got to be over 125 before you considered it a problem. I want you to just critically think about the role of insulin. You know what that is. We know that insulin is that transport vehicle for sugar to get it into the cells. We know that when the cells are inundated with insulin, that they become resistant. We know that a lot of the things in the modern diet, the saturated or hydrogenated fats, actually, I should say, the hydrogenated fats, the trans fats, the oxidized fats, the damaged fats are hurting. We know that foods like plants have a lot of nutrients, and there may be times when people need to eliminate them for whatever therapeutic reasons, but we need to be able to include them and be able to help our people identify which foods work and which foods don't. There are low sugar, low starch plants that are brimming with nutrients that help that microbiome we talked about earlier, that help restore the sensitivity of those insulin receptors, that help with the nutrients like magnesium and chromium and DHA and all these other nutrients that are required for healthy glucose insulin regulation. So my parting words are, don't take anything you read or have learned in school at face value. Think it through critically. And don't look for a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody that comes across your way. There are ways to look for the deep root causes, and in one person, the root cause might be toxin exposure. The root cause in someone else might be microbiome imbalance from years of antibiotic use. In others, it might be a thyroid condition that hasn't been diagnosed or has been mistreated. All of these things play in to having appropriate metabolic health, to having appropriate insulin glucose regulation, and to restoring the sensitivity of those cells to insulin. You're getting a lot out of this, and you're questioning some of the conventional ways of approaching insulin resistance, then I want to be together with you as the future of healthcare. We know that the current system is broken. We know that we need to leave behind the archaic way of looking at disease and symptom management and really focus on getting to the root cause. I've dedicated my life to helping people overcome, identify root causes, and correct and make restore balance. And I've dedicated my life to helping other practitioners through our practitioner trainings. So if you want to know more about some of those practitioner trainings, you can check the links and you can go to inemethod.com. If you want to learn more about what conventional doctors are doing wrong when it comes to your health, click on the video to the right. I'm Dr. RitaMarie, and I'll see you there.